Okay, good evening. We'll start our meeting for the City of Beaumont Finance and Audit Committee meeting, regular session, starting at 6:05 this evening. If I could have roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Lara. Treasurer's not here. Chair Elaine Morgan.
Here.
Richard Beneke.
Here.
John Chamberlain. Steve Cooley.
Here.
Stephen Martino. Here. Joanne Roberts.
Here.
Thank you. I have two excused absences that I am aware of this evening. Treasurer Sharon Geiser is out of town, and Councilmember Laura is not going to be with us this evening. As far as I know, John will be coming in, so.
Great.
And if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I have one adjustment to the agenda. If we could move number 7 up to number 6 and just flop those around. And then number 8, which typically is our review of our meeting for the treasurer's report to council. We won't be doing that this evening because Sharon is absent. Is there any other adjustments or changes to the agenda? Okay.
So what you're saying is we're moving review of treasurer's report to number 6?
Yeah, this is the treasurer's report that Milana has been trying to run. That it's a different one than the.
Clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. On the call to order list, we did drop Ray Santos off. And even though he has not been sworn in yet as counsel.
It got done a little early.
Okay.
If he comes in, we'll add him.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we'll move. Do we have public comments?
Yes.
Good evening, John. Can we let the record show that John arrived at 6:09?
I apologize.
That's
Traffic
fine.
is horrible. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, got it.
And do we have public comment?
Yes. Judy Bingham.
Good evening, Ms. Bingham.
Hello. Judy Bingham, 115 Minnesota. I had the opportunity this afternoon to attend a San Gorgonio Pass Water Agency meeting where the directors were in essence giving themselves a $9,000 a year raise. I spoke up about how one of the directors, Mr. Castaldo, as you all know, who sat on the Planning Commission and City Council for years and passed through all the developments that have resulted in the overdraft of the Beaumont Basin and should have been indicted along with the other council members. And I was at that point interrupted by the president. But later on in the meeting, Mr. Castaldo felt he needed to share with everyone in the room and public that he wasn't indicted because the city attorney lied. At which point I said, read state law. Read it yourself. If they all knew they had conflicts of, if I knew they had conflicts of interest in 2004 and pointed it out repeatedly in council meetings, Wouldn't you expect one of them to have looked up Government Code 1090? I'm telling you this now because all of you are responsible for following state and federal laws. This is serious, but you believe whoever you want to believe. That's your choice. In the next 2 months, government agencies throughout the state will be releasing their 2017 audited financial statements. The city of Beaumont has yet to release their 2016 audit, nor has the city released the June 2016 general ledger to me. My public record request for this ledger is now 16 months overdue. Might that bother some of you? I guess not. The Federal Securities and Exchange Commission requires every government agency to maintain an audit committee that is responsible for hiring independent auditors, approving the audits, and overseeing bond transactions. Beaumont is required to comply with SEC laws because the Beaumont Finance Authority has $200 million in bond debt, and the Community Facilities District has $200 million in bond debt. SEC cease and desist order against the Beaumont Finance Authority, Undertaking 22, requires the designation of an individual officer that will be held responsible for ensuring compliance with federal laws in an attempt to stop Beaumont's charade of claiming that no one is accountable for fraud and forging of government documents. But this committee pretends federal laws don't apply to them, only state laws. So let's review the California State Controller's investigative report
Ms. Bingham, you're
released
over
on
your 3
November
minutes.
3rd.
Can we wrap it up? Thank you. Okay. And there's no other public comment?
No other comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment at 6:11. Okay, we'll move on to our action items. The first item for this evening is the adoption of the minutes dated October 2nd. I have one correction that I found, and that was just that Stephen Marino was not present at the last meeting, so if we could correct that. Did anybody else have any other changes? Look good?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we could have a motion to accept the minutes with the correction?
Move to approve as corrected.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to member appointments and vice chair appointment. We have 2 vacancies on the committee. Mr. Hallowell has resigned because he is moving out of state. And Ray Santos was appointed as a council member. So he'll be finishing out the vacancy on the council for the next year. So we have 2 positions open, and that would move Stephen into our a voting member position, and John Chamberlain. And if I could have a motion to move them into our voting member positions.
We have that authority, not the council. I'm just want to clarify. I mean, we have that authority. The council set up the guidelines to allow for alternates. So the clarification here for the new members is that the alternates, once a vacancy occurs, the alternates automatically move up.
Exactly.
So I don't know if we actually need a motion, but if you want one,
Well,
I'll so move.
We'll do it just to be sure we're covering our bases.
I'll so move.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And Ray Santos was our vice chair, so we need to elect a vice chair that will be moving into, typically what we do is I guess, as a courtesy, the vice chair moves into the full chair position. That'll be voted on in January. My term expires January 1st. So the person that'll be filling the vice chair position would move into the chair position. So do we have nominees for the vice chair?
Who wants it?
Nominate Steve Cooley.
I'm willing to do that.
Will you accept the,
Yes.
Second?
and then can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank
All
you.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay. And Miss Milana, are you ready?
Always, always. Okay, there we go. Okay, tonight I'm presenting to you the next of the policies that I said I would have drafted for this committee to review. This is our accounts payable and disbursements policy. And just for a reminder, we've already looked at the overview of the policies and capital assets. And now we're doing this one. Next month, I'll have the cash receipts side and then also a short cash management and investment one to put together. In January, put them all together with indexing and yeah, you know, with all the numbers and
The contents
there
one?
we go,
There
table
you
of
go.
contents. There we go. We'll have all that together in January for this committee to review in total and then make a recommendation for council to approve it. So this is just the next one in order. What I did was I started with like a blank policy that I had found out there, and I started adding to it all the specifics that we do based on the software that we have now and the procedures that we have in place. So when I went through it, I tried not to forget any steps. I had my staff also read through it and try to think if I'd forgotten anything. But hopefully the committee members have all read this, and if you have any questions on steps or the order of things, or if there's some clarification you think I need in this policy, I am welcome to any suggestions.
I did go through it, did not find any changes that I would make. I felt that it was well-written and that you had, gone through all the bullet points. So I personally don't have any changes that I would make.
Okay. I was
And I-
trying to find the checks and balances, the approvals, and the how many hands it goes through before it gets processed. So.
Okay.
And I concur with that assessment. I've
Great.
also been through it. Very pleased.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate in this section related to prevailing wage or any of the requirements under that? Would this also be factored into that? I recently went through trust me, it was a very painful class on prevailing wage, for lack of a better term. And the reporting requirements have changed significantly to the point where you have to validate as the holder of that project.
Right.
That actually, in fact, everything has been encumbered, it has been discharged accordingly, and you actually have to close those books out as the holder of that project now. So I'm wondering, since this is the accounts payable component, do you want to incorporate that as part of it?
We could do that, or I could refer or change it to refer to a section. There are some sections that I'd like to add as more specific as we go along. I'd like to, once we get this all set, so we have our framework ready to go, I'd like to do something on payroll specific, something for budgeting specific, something maybe for project accounting specific, where we could pick up not just that kind of prevailing wage, when does it apply, when does it not, the kinds of projects we have, but also the funding sources and how we identify those. I think all of that could come together in a lot more detail as we start pulling in more detail to the procedure manual in total.
Sound
Okay.
good?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you.
I had a question.
sure.
On item number 6, under accounts payable on page 2,
Yes.
the last sentence, new accounts may be established by the Director of Finance or Senior Accounting Technician.
Yes.
I was wondering why the 2 individuals and not just the Director of Finance?
Because if I'm not there, I need somebody who can establish a new account in the chart so that work can continue. The regular accounting technicians don't have that authority. They can't do it. So it would only be the 2 of us. I could assign that to another director, but it would be of a different department, and they may or may not understand the numeral sequencing in the chart of accounts. So I thought it was safer to have it be the senior and myself. When we have more staff and we have a better definition between them, it would probably be the accounting manager and then the director of finance, and it wouldn't be a staff person.
How often are new accounts established?
Right now, it's more frequent as we start really trying to pull things apart and see what it looks like. So right now, there's more, but it seems to be less and less as we get it established in the new system. So we're probably adding a new account, maybe 1 a month, unless we add a new bond issue. Then we're going to have a whole slew of accounts. Or if we decide to split out a new fund, which I did last month, added yet another fund because I just didn't have enough. So that's going to have a lot more accounts too. So it just kind of depends on the situation.
So right now, do you have a senior accounting technician?
Yes, I do.
That you?
No, no.
In the future, as the city grows, will there be, in your vision, do you foresee more than 1 senior accounting technician? More than one senior accounting technician?
Possibly, but I think before we get to that size, one of the things we'll need to do is have an accounting manager who can have day-to-day oversight over all the general ledger activities, all the different functions, so that we have that segregated. That's got a lot different activity than, say, project accounting or budgeting. So I would like to, at some point, have an accounting manager with the general ledger oversight.
The reason I bring it up, and it might seem like a minor issue, is that establishing counts is one way, not the only way, but one way you can sneak something in. And I think it's important that we make sure we have the right people in place. You know, I guess you have 2 people, they could be in collusion and set something up and under a false fake name or whatever. And, you know, I'm trying to think of the checks and balances here, and I don't know if the city manager would be a alternate versus a senior accounting technician, or maybe the way you have it is kind of standard in the industry.
Right. But here's an idea. What if before we set a new account, if we need a new fund or we need a whole new set because of something specific, that we have a form where we have the details of that, and we have, say, the city manager, like, just initial it so that we have that, knowing that somebody knows that we're setting up something new.
I would feel very comfortable with it.
Okay.
Richard, so are you questioning the new vendor setup, or are you questioning the checks and balances for the actual payable entry?
I'm questioning the process right now in terms of establishing new accounts.
Right.
Okay.
Number
Right now, it sounds
6.
like we're establishing a lot of new
Okay,
accounts.
so it's number 6 that you're
Number 6
concerned
on the
with?
accounts payable entry
Okay.
section. Mm-hmm.
All right, I was just trying to define where your concern actually was. Okay.
No, but I like that idea. I would be in favor of that. I think
Okay. Yeah, because there's usually, can't imagine any other reasoning, but you usually know why it is you have to set up a new account. Either we set up vacation in every department but one, which is a whoops, which someone could say, yeah, you need a vacation account for that department.
I'm just saying, you got a lot of accounts, and then all of a
Right.
sudden, there's one there, that ABC account, well, what is this for?
Right. Yep. We can definitely do that. That's not a difficult thing at all.
Yeah.
Is there a vendor qualification process in other words, setting up an account for a new vendor? Is there a
process that new vendors have to go through for qualification, similar to, for instance, what the building and safety department would require from a contractor if they're coming in to file a permit? Do we do any kind of research to see if they're fully insured, if they're
The department head that is requesting a new vendor for whatever their purpose is to go through all of that to make sure that if it's for a project that they have their insurance, if it's for materials, I always ask the question, can't you get this from an existing vendor? And sometimes it's a matter of, well, this is a specific this or that, which I take their word for it because I don't know. Or we want to have more than one source where we can check prices against them. So then we have documentation that we require in order to set up the vendor in the system.
there's a
But
separate policy for vendor qualification? Like, for instance, is there maybe one-time vendor accounts that are set up for a maximum dollar value, or?
we don't have any, right, we don't have any one-time vendor setups. We don't have that, but we do have our purchase order system, which is in place. Having a more specific purchasing policy is also one of the things that I'd like to go to down the road. Right now, we don't have a centralized purchasing function, so it's one of that's a little harder to wrap my arms around. But as we get to that point as well, then making sure we have a really good policy to control that is something else I want to look into. Having it decentralized, it makes it a little more difficult to control some of the vendor choices, and unless it's through an RFP process.
I'm kind of hearing, and I kind of expect that right now we're dealing with the whole global issue, but
Yes.
as we move further along, I would expect that you'll have some way of pulling in these new vendors to ensure that the vendor's legitimate does exist.
Oh, yes.
But unfortunately, we're dealing with so much basic stuff now that that's coming further down the road as we've discussed the payroll and prevailing wage and that type of thing, correct?
Right, that is absolutely true. But the other thing that we do with new vendors is we make sure that they give us a W-9. There's a federal requirement. You need to look up those ID numbers to make sure that that vendor is actually qualified. And if we were doing anything federally funded, if there's somebody that's debarred and not allowed, we have to know that before we have a contract with them. So that's just a good step to be in the habit of looking at.
That's a good idea. On number 16 on page 3, says all invoice packets greater than $1,000 not supported by a purchase order. When would something not be supported by a purchase order?
It's during our transition of making sure everyone's using purchase orders. We still get a few here and there. I don't think that many come through for city manager to actually sign off on. It's pretty minimal, but there's still a few here and there. As we get everybody used to using the purchase order system, it's getting much, much better where we can control some of that from the get-go. It's so much easier if the purchase order is already in place, everybody knows, then we can get those bills paid.
Well, I have a problem with that being in there because it's a negative, and it sounds like it's standard procedure to prove something not supported by a purchase order. And I think your goal is to have everything
Yes,
by purchase order. It's just as an interim right now.
this is for the ones that we find as we go through that slipped and didn't quite make it.
So how would we, how could we rephrase that to, maybe you can't, I don't know, but it just doesn't sound right to me. It
How
sounds
about,
like-
how about phrasing something more along the lines, in the event of a invoice greater than $1,000, which is not supported by a purchase order?
Okay, or something like.
So make it jump out
Yeah.
as the
Like
exception?
the city endeavors that all blah, blah, blah are by purchase orders. But in the event that, got to be, do the
Yeah.
positive on the positive. City endeavors to have all purchase orders, everything by purchase order. But in the event that,
Okay, got it. I can do that.
something like, I don't know.
Sure.
It's more of a kind of a, this is what we really do here.
Right. Okay.
That's enough complaining. Overall, I think it's really great.
Great.
It's moving in the right direction. I just have one more informational question if I could ask on number 12, on page 8 of 16. It's referencing EFT transfer
Yes.
Is that typically utilized by the city quite often?
No, we only have a handful of vendors that we do that for. It's limited right now on what we use it for. There are arguments in both ways that we should be paying more through EFT, and there's those who say you should pay less by EFT. And right now, we've just left it. Those vendors that are used to being paid by EFT, we've remained that way with them, but others we've stayed with checks. We haven't gone to making any changes to that process right now.
So it's a minimal percentage, you would say, of the total transactions given out now as far as either transaction count or dollar value?
For EFTs, we probably have 3 vendors that we use EFT transfer for, and that's it.
These are reoccurring, high reoccurring rates,
These are reoccurring.
always by purchase order?
Yes.
Yeah, there's always the documentation, and all of the documentation goes through the,
Yes.
Same
And
process.
if it's EFT
It's
or
just a
check,
method
it's
of
still on
payment.
that weekly transcript that the treasurer reviews. We don't do the send button until the treasurer signed off on the warrants, which includes those wires.
So aside from the different transaction system, it goes through the same checks and balance process?
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Now, we're gonna be reviewing a few more of these subsets of the overall policies and procedures manual, basically. And,
As we go forward.
yeah, and then the plan is to what, bring back to, like a final draft document that we will review? and
Right,
we'll-
in
we'll
January.
recommend approval to the council.
And then from time to time, as we get more specifics added to it, when we feel it's significant enough, take it to council again, and we'll just have that as an ongoing process.
Okay, is there any other questions on the policy? If you find some, during the week, as you're reviewing it further, we can always bring it back up for
Absolutely,
policy in motion.
absolutely.
I know I can't probably talk to this now, but on the one on the accounting, it says just accounting on it. The 5-6 pager accounting.
Oh, the initial one, the very first one.
Initial
Mhm.
one. I think I missed that meeting.
Oh,
But anyway, I did have questions on it, but I don't want to discuss it here because it's not on the agenda, but maybe when we get the overall product
okay,
down the road, I could bring up those. They're just minor, but I'd like some clarification on a few things.
okay, yeah, no problem.
Or we can add it to the next agenda, John.
Richard?
Richard. There you go.
How soon we
work.
forget.
I know.
I can bring all of it to the next meeting because I'll just have the one section that's new, and we can have all of it together so that we then
can do
have
that.
it at January. Maybe we have it all cleaned up, and it'll be easier in January when we see it all put together.
Oh, we only have one subset left?
That I'm going to do in our first round.
First
yes.
round.
Yeah, I was trying to keep it kind of broad, the more general function, so that we can get that step completed.
Well, I know you all discussed it, and I just wasn't here, but I don't want to put a burden on this committee, just for that one thing. If we could bring it back however you want to do it.
Okay.
But I know it needs to be agendized before we talk about it, so I don't
Yeah.
want to break any rules or regulations.
Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to number 4, which is the selection of the finance report. Milana copied just little brief excerpts from the reports that we got from, let's see, this is November, that would have been September's meeting, right?
All of the meetings we've had.
Okay.
I went through the ones that it seemed like it was more popular, or we like this, or we still wanted to look at that, and some of them I had notes where I put little notes that said maybe quarterly, or I put maybe
Okay.
annually, or so I thought, okay, in order to get direction and start providing a consistent financial reporting package, I would just kind of
Right.
give you all the ones that we've looked at in the scope so far, and we can say yes or no, and I can make notes, and then we'll start fresh with financial reports,
Okay.
instead of confusing you every single time we have a meeting. So the first page of the little snippets The two reports are almost identical. The difference between the top one and the bottom one, the top one has each individual account that's in the chart of accounts. The bottom one is just like the subtotals of the categories. So you wouldn't see the accounts within it, but you'd have some subtotals to be able to look at the information. That's the first one.
Yeah, well, no, they're all kind of same, they're all kind of.
They're all
the same.
kind of the same, which is where I started
Yeah.
thinking, I'm just getting things confused. I've got too many repeats.
No, I agree, and what I'd like to see, and everybody chime in, I'd like to see some on a regular quarterly basis, like every 3 months. Then I'd like to see some on a semi-annual basis, like twice a year.
Sure.
And I think personally, what I'd like to see on a quarterly statement would be more of the category, count level, detail level, and then on a semi-annual, more of the summary basis.
Okay.
And I don't know, I'm trying to figure out what the difference is between the comparative income statement and the city council report income statement.
The city council one is even more summarized. It's like squished a little, there's a little bit less information in the one for city council.
Okay, so
They wanted it to
we
be
should have
as,
more information in the city council.
Okay, are you moving over to the next page on that one?
No, I'm just looking at this
he's just looking along.
the front page.
Do you have a,
Oh,
do you have a guesstimate of number of pages? Realizing that the electronics are a whole world of difference, but it gives us
Sure.
some concept. I'm thinking if we're looking at the category versus the summary, we probably ought to have an idea of how much we're seeing.
Right.
It is so voluminous that we can't begin to review it all. It may not have any value.
True. And I didn't think about noting that, but I believe that the first report that I have a snippet of, the income statement at the account level, I want to say that just for the general fund, that's about 20 pages. Because there are so many accounts.
okay.
Okay. And by category,
Probably 4.
yeah. And I'm assuming, well, I'm sure that if something pops out on that summary that looks oddball to us, we could get that information
Oh, yes.
quickly.
Yes. Can do that.
So the question that I throw out to everybody is what do you think is going to make most sense to us, something that we're going to see regularly that we'll recognize if it appears odd versus something that has so much detail, and I love detail, but so much detail that it's like, we can't deal with this, forget it.
I agree with you. I like the category summary. Then if something jumps out, we can always ask for more detail.
Right.
Nancy?
I have a question, and it relates to both what you said, Stephen, and what you said, Richard. And that is, when we talk about the income statement, and you brought up that you'd like to see quarterly and you'd like to see semi-annually. I agree with that. I do. But are we also seeing every month and quarterly and semi-annually and year-to-date and the volume of detail that would be in that? I mean, realistically, is it exception level reporting where we would actually be able to see and understand it, or are we just asking for so much data if we do this every single month at every one of these meetings where we have to go over it every single month? Because I think I felt that quarterly was sufficient and not monthly on some of these reports.
If we do quarterly, my thinking was that we would look at it the month after the quarter ended. So we'd look at September in October or maybe November, depending on timing. We'd look at October to December in January, probably February. You know, you would only see those reports at the natural quarter ends of the city's fiscal period.
Right.
So on the interim months, you wouldn't see that report at all.
Okay, all right, because it just seemed like it was
Too much.
a lot for you And then if we're not willing to really dive into that information, it's just not fair to be asking for it if we're not getting a benefit from it.
It can be an avalanche. I mean,
Yeah.
as I said, there are so many reports and options that it's crazy, which is why I need to step back and let the committee decide what do you want to see and how often, so that
But I
I
have
don't
no-
inundate you either.
I have no problem with if anybody feels like they need more information.
Oh, sure.
At any time to just say, could I see that month's report?
Right.
You know, at any time.
Yep.
You know, in my mind, usually you do something like you say quarterly, at the month following, et cetera. And then if it's not enough information, then you say, I need to see this more frequently.
Right.
Or I need to see this month or the last 2 months because this is just starting to raise issues with me. But, you know, you can always ask for more.
Sure.
But
Sure.
to just bury you in a reporting process, I don't want to do that unless we're also willing to
Right.
dig into the trenches and go through it on a month-to-month basis.
Okay.
I think that the one we have to do on a monthly is to review the report that gets given to council. That we absolutely need to do.
Okay.
So
That's
if
an easy one.
if they're
That's
doing
true.
basically a recap, and we might need more data to validate that and recommending that council accept it, I think that's an absolute.
Okay, well, we're not down to that yet, are we? That's item 5,
Yeah, that's
correct?
down on page 3, but I'm making a note anyway, because you're right.
I mean,
If I'm
weren't
going
we
to
still
present
on
it to
1
them-
and 2 and 3 and 4?
Well, yeah, kind of.
Okay, all right. No, I was just trying to make sure I hadn't missed something.
No.
I'm glad you know how I feel. I'm like, oh, I can run this. Oh,
Yeah,
I
I
can run this. And yeah.
Well,
it's out
yeah,
of hand.
as we're going through these, I want to do the absolutes. And the absolutes is the city council report, and that's
Yes.
given to them monthly.
Yes.
And then whatever that report we would give them on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, I think we need to make sure that we're reviewing those, so that at
Okay.
least we're going through and
Okay.
doing what we're supposed to do, which is to assist council
Okay.
and recommending those approvals.
The statement that is,
So
The
item
second one
5.
on page
we're
1.
seeing monthly,
right,
correct?
the second one on page 1
And item 6, we're seeing monthly,
Yep.
correct?
Right.
is one
Okay,
of the
but
ones that I'd like to be presenting
item
to
1 and
council
2
quarterly
not,
too.
Correct?
Wait.
I just, before we leave it, I want to
No,
be
we're
clear.
not, we haven't. We've got to decide what we need in order to review
Okay,
what's
but-
going to city council.
1 and 2, we're not receiving monthly, correct?
Correct.
Correct. But number 2 is the one that I believe council would want to see quarterly.
Okay.
Because they're going to want to see
Okay,
budget
quarterly
to
is number
actual.
2. I just want to be clear, because
Yes.
otherwise, I'm not going to be able to say yes on the minutes. Say, that's not what I thought.
So we're
Okay.
talking the category summary.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, is that good, Steve?
Yes, and, you know, eventually, I think we're going to understand those a little better because the reports are new. And of course, if there's some exception, something that jumps out, and right now, when we look down at what's expected and what we're seeing, some of those numbers may seem a little weird, they may be a little low or a little high. And of course, your input's going to be, well, this type of tax only comes in, you know,
Right.
quarterly or every other quarter, and will fit into that. But I'm thinking when we're seeing these category summaries, if as you're preparing the report for us, you see something that absolutely makes no sense, of course, you're going to bring it
yes.
to our attention and say,
Right.
this is what I found, and I think that gives us the basis that we need to get.
Right.
So we're saying that number 2, we would want to see on a quarterly basis then?
That would be my suggestion.
Yeah? Okay. All right, so we'll do that one on a quarterly. And number 1, we're going to drop. Is that correct? Because that's a lot more detail we
Right.
don't necessarily need.
Right. Unless somebody sees something that they want to look at.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be available if somebody, right.
I think that's good.
Number 4, we're doing quarterly.
Yeah, 3 and 4, the difference is the same as 1 and 2, but the information that's presented is comparing where are we this year compared to how were we the same point last year. So if you want to be able to compare year to year if we're trending in the right direction, then maybe the number 4 is something that you'll want to look at quarterly just to see where we stand. Sometimes there's timing issues, but we should be able to identify those as well.
And I think part of that, because of the new system, may not be as valuable today, but 2-3 years down the road will have much more value. We may or may not still be there, but I think we need to set that in motion for our predecessors.
Okay.
What's your thought?
I think that's good.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
And, you know, and these things aren't going to be locked in stone.
Right.
No, we can change it at any time. I just wanted to come up with
This is
something
the
so I
strongest
can
recommendation going forward.
start.
Okay, so
giving you a
number 4, we're
consistent-
going to do on a quarterly basis then? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then number 3, we're dropping for now? Mm-hmm. Okay,
Or rather than say dropped, it just
As
can be made available
As needed.
Yeah.
as needed,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
okay, so then the city council reports, those we are going to look at on a monthly basis?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now number 7 is the top one on page 4. And basically that's just the bank account, all the ins and outs for that month. And it can be really big, it can be, but if somebody wants to look at the cash transactions, what's coming in and going out of the city just as far as a cash flow idea, that would be something you could look at. Some months are going to be really big, some months are going to be really small, but it's still going to be multiple pages. And I don't know how much detail you want to look at for that.
I'm personally, I'm not really interested in that.
I would agree, and I also am a little bit reluctant to have this reported, put out here on the website every month. You don't want John Q. Citizen, who doesn't understand, presented with all this information without an adequate background. It suddenly, they're starting to compare some of these, I'm sorry, I'm having a tough time with these sunglasses with an eye surgery, but just some of them, cash support. Let's say transit. If you've got a report that is out there that somebody doesn't have to request, that's just there, they're going to dig through it without any understanding of what it is. You're either going to be inundated with an uninformed consumer who doesn't really need the information, doesn't know what to do with it, just wanting to churn through it. And I'm not sure that behoves anybody to just
Yeah.
make excess
Yeah, as needed,
available.
as needed. I mean, if one of us hears something on the street and. we
Or
need to-
John Q. Citizen wants it.
Yeah, wants it, yeah.
But rather than just say, here it is, do something with it. I think that creates problems.
Okay.
Wasn't this the treasurer's report that Sharon wanted?
The second one, number 8, the middle
Number
one
8 is.
on page 4.
Okay, okay.
Which is
Oh,
the-
I see. All right, you're right, Steve, sorry.
Yeah, I had a quick question on number 7.
Sure.
And also applies to 1 and 3. I noticed on both, on all 3 of those, it looks like there's underlined blue font information. Are these expandable? In other words, in this
They're drill
report?
downs.
So if it was transmitted to somebody at a request for review, they could hit that link and it would expand the full report?
I don't know. I don't know if because I think I'd have to export it either as a PDF or into Excel. And I don't think you have the links once I do that. But when I pull it up on the screen, which is how I did this, I can drill down until I don't have any more blue lines. I can go all the way down to journal entry level detail.
Just information.
Sure.
So we're going to pass on the transaction report thing?
I think we should at this point. We can always add it back in, as needed, like we're doing with the other ones.
I misunderstood. I thought we were jumping to 8. So, yeah, I agree with the number
Okay.
7.
Okay.
And now number 8 was a one-page report, knowing that I start with what comes out of the system, but I had to manipulate it because the formulas aren't right in it.
Right.
So, but it shows the cash activity in total for every fund.
Right.
And I still think that that has value to this committee.
Great.
I really like that report.
so.
I know that you're having trouble and having to manually generate it, but it's,
I do find it useful. I do.
And
Yeah.
I think that's something that I would like to see it on monthly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone want to see that
Monthly.
monthly?
Yes.
As long as it's one page,
Well,
okay?
so monthly.
shrink
by-
it till it's one
monthly
page.
meeting at this meeting. Right? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so also on page 4 is number 9, and that's the vendor report that shows the year-to-date, how much we've paid to each vendor. I can summarize the information by vendor and get a year-to-date to know if we've dispersed funds to any one vendor in excess of whatever threshold we want to place. And I think that's helpful in knowing, based on our purchasing and based on our purchase orders, if we're staying in compliance with those limits. So I use it, but I don't know if this committee wants to get to that level of detail, but I do use this.
I like it too. I think it serves as a checks and balance. to see that
Semi-annual?
They're legitimate. If we're just putting it out just to our citizenry, that we have legitimate vendors. We're not having something pop up there that Steve Cooley and Associates suddenly is getting $10,000 a month. I like it just from that, if absolutely nothing else, even
And
if
then
it doesn't,
How often?
and
Quarterly?
quarterly.
Quarterly? What threshold for dollar amount would you want to use? Do you want to use 10,000 or you want?
Couldn't you research, if you have the ability, in particular the system, and generate how many vendors we have that receive payments of more than 10,000, or
I want to.
does that make sense?
I want to say when I did that last that it ended up being a couple of pages long. And you'll see that more because we have the public works contracts now that are ongoing. So those are always big numbers. So that's making there be a few more. But we could look at it at 10,000, and if it's just too much, I'll have them in dollar amount order. So we can look at saying, oh, you know what, this is getting longer. We're only going to look at 50,000, or we're only going to look at 100,000. We can do it that way. I'll keep them in dollar order.
Now, did you do it the 10,000 because that was the basic limit before we had to go to council to get approval?
Yes.
And now we're increasing that, are we not, from
That's-
10,000 to?
That's on City Council's agenda for tomorrow night to look at our purchasing ordinance in order to make it more standard with other government
Right, so
agencies.
city manager would be approving over a higher limit than what we
Right.
currently have? Okay, which I think that's great.
Yeah, it is helpful.
Yeah.
It will be very helpful, so.
So do we want to look at the vendor reports over that limit? The new limit that's going to be set, or do we want to see everything over 10,000? That's another question.
Right. And like I said, we can make it a sliding scale. If we start looking at it and it gets longer and longer, we can always say, okay, let's change it to a different dollar amount. So
Start with where she has it
start with
now and
10,000.
just see how it goes and then
Okay.
adjust it if necessary.
And then I would suggest that once a year, just once a year, the report be generated with all vendors. And it's huge, obviously. Or all vendors who have not appeared on a quarterly report, just so you could
Right.
say, we've looked at all these oddball things that do pop up,
Right.
and there weren't anything that obviously should have never been a vendor.
We can do that, or we can say anything above $100 because we do a lot of refunds.
Right, right.
And I don't know that I want a lot of people's
Yeah, you're right
names
there, too.
published. It doesn't seem fair to do that.
So, yeah, maybe $1,000, maybe.
We could do that.
Okay, and just once a year, one-time thing?
Okay, so for now, with this one, we're going to do a quarterly. On number 9, the vendor report, anything over 10,000 quarterly.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
The next one is on page 5. It's number 10. It's the one at the top. And it is fund transfers. It's also one page, but it will report to you how much in funding has been moved from one fund to another fund or back. So it would be, did we move money from, I don't know, the gas tax fund into the general fund to cover costs? Did we move AQMD funds to the project funds? So you can see that we're funding projects. it would just be in total so that you could see where the monies are moving back and forth from.
Do these transfers require council approval?
No. Well, if it's for a project, yes, because we have a CIP budget that is approved annually, which we had. The other transfers, I shouldn't say no, they are in the budget, so they are approved in the budget. And if we were to go outside of the budget, then yes, it has to go to council for approval.
The example you gave to me is kind of, I don't think it was a very good example. You know, if you have money in a fund that's specifically designated to do X, and you need some money in Y, it's you know, that to me should be a council decision, not an administrative decision.
Right. No. With gas tax money, the reason I said gas tax to general fund, gas tax covers our street repairs, which is recorded in the general fund. So it would just be to see that we move the money over, but it has to be in accordance with the budget that was already approved.
So does anybody see that we would need to review that at any point?
No.
Okay. But we know it's available.
Always.
Okay, and then
Then we have bank reconciliations. We reconcile all of the accounts monthly except the pooled operating cash account, which we reconcile weekly because there's too much activity. I don't know if this committee wants to have oversight and review those. I don't know how much information it provides.
That is something that we should be relying on our auditors to ensure, is that reconciliations are done. I think I'd feel comfortable if we have a certification or whatever from you, from whomever, that the bank reconciliations are done. For us to actually see the reconciliations, I don't know that
Right.
those numbers are going to mean anything to us, but if we just feel comfortable that reconciliations are done on a timely basis, I think that's adequate.
What if I just report the current status? Which ones have been reconciled through what dates? That can just be part of the monthly report to the committee.
See, this, you're absolutely right, Stephen. In the past, we had problems with bank reconciliations, considerable ones.
Everybody has.
We were way behind in them. And as an internal control, we don't want that to ever happen again. But on the other hand, if we're up to date, we certainly shouldn't need to see them. So I would be okay if somehow or other we just had some sort of a monthly report on where the reconciliations were, just so that we know visibility, that we are not ever getting in that position of getting behind again.
Sure.
Now, it doesn't matter to me where you put it. You could put it as a footnote on the treasurer's report. You could put it as a staff report to us. However it is that you can at least incorporate that knowledge that we are not falling behind again. But I agree with you, if we are up to date, there doesn't seem to
Right.
be a lot of purpose to seeing it.
Absolutely.
It can just be part of your report.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay. So we're going to do that as just a report on a monthly basis.
Right, but not the
Staff
actual
report. Okay.
documents themselves.
Okay.
Let me just deal with the concept that if for some reason we're not comfortable with that, we can just ask to see them.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
And the last thing that I came up with on the list was project accounting. We now have it up and running. Yay! And I am able to generate project reports on any of the projects that we approved in the CIP. So I wasn't sure that you necessarily wanted to see all the project accounting. That really wasn't what I was getting at. But if there are specific projects that we have ongoing that this committee wants some kind of report, status report financially on a project that we have, that's something that can be presented. So I have it there only as like almost an honorable mention because it's something that can be presented at any given time.
Where would we find out where would we find out, which report would we find out if a contract is let for, let's say, $10 million? Competitively bid contract let for $10 million to your project on whatever. And there are overrides on that contract totaling $2 million. How would we know about that?
That would be in the purchase orders. So I could do purchase order status reports as well. That would tell you every open purchase order, who it was issued to, and the status of it right now, how much of it has been fulfilled and how much hasn't. And I can also run a report that says if a purchase order has been adjusted for any change orders or anything like that.
Now, change orders typically go through council.
Absolutely.
Right.
The awarding of the contracts also goes through
Yeah,
council.
I understand that. The reason I bring it up is my experience with cities over the years and government in general. It's oftentimes there'll be contracts bid, you know, and trying to save money and be fiscally responsible. Governing bodies typically go with the lowest bidder as qualified by their RFPs or RFQs. Many times, unfortunately, these things are low bid, but they end up actually costing the
Right.
agency quite a bit more
Cost
money.
overruns
Oh,
get crazy, yeah.
I experienced that a lot. When I was involved with the city. And, you know, I know you can't cover everything in a bid proposal. And there are certain circumstances that do come up that will add to costs. But I think it's important to know, and the problem is, like, some of these projects we'll bid on, they're very big dollar items, but it'll be a one-time thing in 20, 30 years. We don't do it every year. So if we get the wrong person in there or wrong company and they override it 10, 20, 30%, well, we're in a way, we're kind of stuck with having to pay that. And plus the delays and everything else that goes on with all that kind of rock and roll. I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, but I'd like to be able to see if that's occurring, especially in some of the projects that are coming up.
When, looking at, when there's major capital projects contracted out, maybe to a single GC, or not sure how the actual delivery strategy is done on most of them. But does the project have a mandated schedule that's part of the contract, along with a schedule of values and a cash flow projection that shows exactly what the schedule for the deliverable is from the contractor? This is your duration, what they're tasking in there, and the cash flow can be projected all the way from the start of the contract to the end of closeout.
Right.
Record drawings, whatever's developed as part of that project. They have that built into the contract where you can track a cash flow similar to what we're doing on operational side, but
Right.
also
On the
project side.
the
That should be
larger
developed
ones.
pretty easily.
It's done on the larger projects. We do have that. And I also have the ability and have been entering the budgets for that. So if we say that the cash flow for this piece should come in July, I have it budgeted for July. If it doesn't come in July, I automatically have a report I can run that says, okay, wait, everybody stop. My source of funds didn't show up. And before we take on the next task, we need to collect that, and then we can move forward. So that's all. It's built into the larger contracts, not the little ones, but the larger ones. And then the budgeting process that I'm using in the project accounting is also tracking that.
And that's more of a question that I've had in my past experiences. As part of the contract that's let to a contractor from the city, do they have built-in controls for change orders? Usually they're going to be built in where there's a limited profit margin in change orders. It's set at a certain percentage. There's a lot of qualification and analysis and materials and labor and classification of rates. That would be something you might be able to look at, something
Right.
not to go into.
Right. If we start having a project that the committee would want to look at the details of, even if it's just to see how the whole accounting, reporting, processing works, if there is a project that we want to monitor, absolutely, I can provide the project accounting for that. So it's entirely possible to do that.
Let me ask a question, Milana. Let's just take, let's say the Oak Valley Parkway expansion that we're going to do and all of that. Is it the department head that is managing those costs as that goes along? Do you have input in that or review of that? How does that just normally get structured?
Well, first we have the CIP that gets developed by Public Works, and then it gets presented to council. They approve it. I take it, I put it into my project accounting. I look at what the costs are and when they should occur based on the way that it was put together. I put that in my budget. Then I look at source of funds. Is it funds that we have currently available? Yes. Then I will actually do the entries to move the cash to cover that part of operations. If it's going to be a grant, I have it notated what kind of grant. I have in there the timeline of when that grant will come up, so that as we're incurring the costs, I already have a source of funds to cover them.
Okay.
We have purchase orders on the vendors. So two things happen in the process. When we put an invoice in for a vendor, if it's over the purchase order amount, it won't let us process it. If we have a vendor's invoice come in and for some reason in total the project now is over budget, it won't let us process the invoice.
Okay.
And I'm running these reports. I've shown the Public Works analyst how to run the reports. We're running them together all the time so that we can see where we're at all the time, so that we all get used to looking at them. We all know exactly where we stand, and that way we don't incur costs that we can't cover.
Okay.
So if we have
Wait.
a vendor who's consistently running over, we're going to have a record of it.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was my point on item 12.
Right.
If we're doing it right, then we should not be surprised by cost overruns. So if you did this report, let's just say hypothetically, you did this report every 6 months, it would show on major projects, let's say, where we were on budget to date, and it would get flagged if there were change orders or cost overruns that were pushing it out of where it should be on the budget to date. So that would flag that it was a problem project.
Right, and we would
that
know
we
that.
were trying to push the envelope
Right.
on what the amount was.
Right, and if we don't have source of funds to cover anything, then we have a completely different conversation than if we do have a source of funds, but we still have to go to city council to get it approved to change it. So we can't just arbitrarily say, oh, well, we've got some money over here, let's throw it into that project. No, it doesn't work that way. Council has to say, you're exceeding your budget, why? And, okay, how much more do you need? And do we have it available, yes or no? So
How we get it or whatever. But it all has to go through council.
absolutely.
Okay.
Now, I could see where council would really like to have this report on major projects. I could see where it could be flexible, whether it was quarterly or not, but I would say at least semi-annually, at the very least. Then, and I would say if council's going to see it, then we should see it beforehand, so that we have a chance to drill down on any questions. And if there's anything that's starting to run, so I don't know how anybody else feels, but I could see where it would be very useful, especially where a lot of these things, we're trying to do it the right way because it wasn't always done the right way in the past, to put it nicely. And this is an effort to do best practices. And best practices is monitoring the projects more closely because we just didn't do enough monitoring in the past.
Right.
So I say, give us this, I would feel, give us this on a quarterly basis. It will probably end up being wanted by council. And at the very least, we should see it, and then we should figure out if it's trapping change orders, cost overruns, if there's any potential too loose practices going on, and that's where we're headed.
Right. Or if there's one particular project that this committee says, okay, this detailed report needs to go to council.
Right.
This,
So we're
this
looking at
project needs to be reviewed closely, whatever.
A summary in this one, right? It would be a summary of the projects that we have.
Right. It'd be
currently going.
project, revenues, expense,
Okay.
the types of expenses.
And we want that quarterly?
I would think so, and I think,
Yeah.
Richard and Steve, wouldn't that address your
and
concerns?
also on a timeline, if there are different timelines, yeah, it might take a year to build
Potrero, and it's 3 months to do Pennsylvania or
lightning
something, right?
whatever.
Yeah,
Putting up a signal here versus
Yeah.
building an entire
Yeah, no.
road over there.
right.
I think
right.
along with the dollar amount, you need to see, okay, this looks like on track, on time, on budget, blah, 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 or there's been a couple overrides, and these are the reasons why the overrides were there. They may make sense, they may not, but at least give the reasons.
Well, I can
I
say
think-
as counsel too, if this was done and if there was any project that was getting off track, I mean, when that vendor presents an update to council, you'd want to know these facts before that presentation. You wouldn't want to have to rely on the vendor to tell you how it was going. You'd want to know ahead of time whether you were pushing the envelope.
Right.
Do they typically award lump sum contracts for the most qualified bidder, or are they typically fee managed based on a not to exceed contract?
Since we've done so few, which way do you think it goes, Todd?
He's snoozing.
Fee-based, or are they just lowest qualified bidder?
With the lump sum, where it's a set amount?
It's been a set amount for the most part, hasn't it?
That limits a lot of change order risk.
Right, right,
It's contracted for a set amount, got to manage fee.
right.
So better to get this.
A lot of them aren't set amounts. I mean, when you're building a bridge, that's not a set amount. That can range anywhere from 25 million to 50 million dollars, and depending on whoever you hire to do the job.
Well,
Well, I think
That's-
we've
don't
been
give it
doing fixed
open.
fees, though. I don't
Yeah.
think we've been doing a
we
lot
don't do
of,
open.
We don't.
Design build.
right.
No, but I
And we're
mean-
just getting started in this process too, but,
Right.
But your RFQs and RFPs, I mean, they define the project, and so people come in and bid based on your definition of what you need to be done. So you're gonna get a range of bidders coming and giving you prices, and you pick what you feel is most qualified within a price, within a budget you feel is reasonable.
But I think our RFPs are pretty specific, aren't they, in what we're looking for?
Going to address it.
Yeah.
Major capital projects are usually.
Could you come to the microphone, Todd? Thank you.
So major capital projects are usually going to be design, bid, build, so that, we've got that specified. And then engineering contracts are typically going to be more quantity bid based, right? So you're saying, hey, how much steel, how much concrete, what's your unit pricing for that? Certain elements, architectural elements, may be a bulk bid project. Bridges, prefabricated pieces may be, bid. So you could have an engineering contract that has elements that have got unit pricing based on quantities. Then you got other pieces that may be a holistic for elements of it. But so architectural projects are usually going to be more fixed price, different kind of contract than we will under streets or drainage or other kind of capital improvements like that.
Right.
So it just depends on what we're delivering and the type of capital project that's coming forward.
Okay.
Like the wastewater, that's gonna be, it's gonna be a rehab on that, basically?
Well, that's,
New construction.
yeah, that's
Okay,
new
that's new
construction,
construction.
rehab of existing, and we have the recycled water going.
Right.
That's a whole new build.
So that's, there's some major, and I think a lot more money's gonna be coming down. Hopefully, we take advantage of it with this whole infrastructure, new federal budget, and the state of California with the new gas tax. I mean, there's gonna be lots.
right. And we did budget in some of the SB1 based on some of the criteria that we knew in advance of the budget. So we have some of that built in. But the really large project, the sewer fund specifically, we have broken that down in the CIP into specific pieces because to have it all be one project would
Oh, yeah,
give
'cause
me a
if-
headache. So we're not doing that. So
yeah,
it's
the
in
brine line and the whole, yeah, I
Brine
mean,
line is
that's
separate
huge.
from the administration building, which is separate from the recycled water tanks, which is separate from the RO, which don't ask me what that means. They're all separate. So,
Okay, so that sounds good. Then we're going to do a summary project reporting quarterly or semi-monthly?
Quarterly and then semi-annually if we wanted to look at it like in an expanded detail
Okay.
or something like that. But we'll start with quarterly and get familiar with it.
Okay.
Now, my question to you is that, does that make sense? I mean,
Yes.
your department, you feel comfortable? You look happy, you're smiling. so
I am.
That's good.
I am.
I think we'll get what we need.
Absolutely.
So oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. Could we just run down what we've decided on by number and I want to make sure I have it right for the minutes.
Or do you want me to email it to you?
You want me to just go real quick? I have number
I've written it down,
one.
I just want to make sure I didn't,
Yeah, number one I have as needed.
okay?
And someone correct me if I get this wrong. Number two, I have quarterly.
Right?
Number three, as needed.
Right?
4 is quarterly.
Correct?
5 monthly. 6 monthly. 7 as needed. 8 monthly. 9 quarterly.
Correct?
10, nah. 11, report the status, but not the forms themselves. And 12, we're going to do quarterly for now,
Right. On a summary basis.
on a summary basis.
So on number 5 and 6, the ones that we're sending over to council each month,
Yes.
are what council sees is going to be is more of a summary of what we are seeing, or are we actually going to see what is being given to council?
If you look at page 3,
Okay?
those are the snippets. Those are what city council is getting, both of those. So my thinking is if you want to see what they're getting, I'm going to give you this exact same report that I would have given to them, which I
Okay.
will then give to them after the committee's seen them.
Okay.
They should match exactly.
And do you feel that that's sufficient information for us to review, or do you think we need another report to back up that info?
I think this is a lot of information, and
Okay.
I think as we do it consistently, it will start flowing together and make sense. And then in 6, 7 months, as we get used to this, we can then adjust it if there's something we need to see more of consistently or something we want to see less of consistently.
Okay.
But I think this is a good overview from a couple of different directions. I think it'll be really awesome.
Okay.
And this should really help the council too, because it's just another set of eyes looking at the information and, you know, not that, and basically if we have questions, it'll be reported at the council meeting that we had some questions on X, Y, and Z. The council can discuss it or not discuss it or whatever, but at least it's another set of eyes looking at the data.
And it helps me too. It helps me because sometimes I get bogged down in the details,
Right.
trying to get things to work the right way. You could look at something and in 2 minutes say, you know, this has got to be, and I'll be like, oh, why didn't I see that? Oh, just one of those things. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I think this is a great start.
I think we're good.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
You are
Milana. I think
welcome.
so our first complete run of all these reports should probably come in at one time, or do you want to stagger them?
Well, what I was thinking is that with our next meeting, I'll do one reporting package for 1 month, just so that we can see what it looks like. And then once we've gone through it and got familiar with it, then I can provide the catch-ups. And then maybe we have 2 or 3 of them at the next meeting, and then you'd be able to see them maybe sequencing and see them in
Well, and the
order.
quarterly ones would be coming at the end of January anyways, or,
Well, the September quarter end, I can
Oh, yeah,
probably
that's
do
right. We
month and
actually
quarter
could go
reporting
backwards.
next month. I'll give
Sure.
you like a whole package, and then
Right.
we'll just start rolling forward.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I think we're good on that. Okay, and then we go on to item number 5 on our meeting dates. I will not be here on December 4th, I believe, is our next scheduled, November, let me get my calendar.
Oh, you got to look at your, okay,
You know me,
that's all right.
my
Just trying to make it easy.
I know. Okay, it is.
It
It's
is the
December 4th. Okay. So I will not be here on December 4th. I don't know if you want to reschedule the meeting. December will be my last meeting because my term ends on January 1st,
Unless you're reappointed.
which I'm not going to do. So December actually is my last meeting. So I am fine if you all want to leave it for December 4th. I'm just letting you know that I will not be here. I think I did check just availability with the 7th, Thursday, the 7th, council chambers is open, and also, I believe it was December 11th, Monday. Those 2 dates are open. If you want to change it, or if you want to leave it on the 4th, we can do that too. It's all up to you.
I have no problem with either the 7th or 11th. I mean, if you want to
Okay.
change it.
Okay? Anybody else?
I can't be on the 7th. That's a class night for me.
Okay, so 7th is not good for you, but 11th is okay?
Yes.
Any of them are fine.
The 11th will be the better one of the two.
You're okay with that?
The 11th,
Okay.
yeah.
And how about you, John? 11th? Okay. So if everybody's in consensus on that, we'll move December's meeting date to Monday, the 11th. Okay, so let me do my F&A here. Okay, and then we also have our first meeting in January is on New Year's Day, January 1st. So we need to adjust that meeting date. We can do it for January 8th, the following Monday. The 15th is Martin Luther King Day. And moving it any further into the month would conflict with our February meeting.
I'm fine with the 8th.
The 8th?
Yeah, they.
Everybody good with the 8th? Okay, so we'll have January's meeting on the 8th. F&A. Okay. Okay, so I think we're good, right? We got December, January, and how about we'll move into future agenda items. I think since we're going to get a full packet of information next month from Milana, unless anybody's got any other things that I think we could probably leave it at just going through those first reports. Okay. And I would just recommend, hopefully we'll get those, like Thursday before. We can spend, we can.
We're giving you an extra week. We're not meeting on the 4th.
I don't know if you were here when we were talking about it, but getting these just a few hours earlier was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was so nice. We
We really appreciated it, Milana. It's just so much nicer if we have the time. I know it's a lot of homework for the weekend, but I think it's so important that we're all able to review this over the weekend and come into our meetings on Monday and be prepared with our questions and, and being able to really use that time that we have. So, okay, that would be great. Okay, so we'll just leave the one agenda item is the review of our first reports.
Yes,
Oh,
do you
and-
want additional agenda items, or do you want to just put that one to bed first?
We'll put that one to bed first, but we will need to have the vice chair move into the chair position on Monday, so we would
I
need
think
to
that-
elect a vice chair?
I think we need to put potential organizational changes on the agenda, because we're going to need to get some alternates to
Right.
back us up.
Right.
If you are leaving and you are not going to remain on the committee, then we're going to have to keep that in mind so that we make sure we backfill with enough people. And I do not know if council will make any changes in who they've appointed to the finance and audit. They might not do that till January, but I think it's probably good to figure out putting it on the agenda that there may be more organizational changes.
Okay, so we'll just leave it
make
as
sure we're
organizational
covered.
changes?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And leave us open to
whatever.
vice chair, chair changes, alternates. I can bring it up at council tomorrow night
Okay,
on how to get more alternates.
right.
And,
I don't know that we've had any applications, have we?
well, I'll tell you what my thoughts were. We had I don't know if we can discuss this because it's not on the agenda. So that's why I think we have to agendize it.
Okay, so we'll just put it down as organizational
I
changes.
think we have some potential names that we could proactively reach out to
Okay,
based on the people who applied for the council position. Some of them had financial backgrounds, so maybe they could be encouraged.
okay.
So I'll bring it up at council tomorrow night.
And see if they want to search out additional people or whatever? Okay,
So that we're
okay,
healthy and
okay,
well-planned.
okay, good.
How many are we losing? Who goes off this year? You go
Just
off?
me.
Oh, just you?
Right, because you were alternate, you were
I'm next
voted in
year.
at the same time, but you were alternate,
Yeah.
so then, yeah, so you have an additional year. Yeah, so
We
it's
have
just,
we have no alternates now.
Not in,
right.
no,
So we-
yep, we've
yeah,
moved
we
them all
moved
up.
them all in. So, yeah,
yeah, so there would be a vacancy with my spot.
yes. Plus nothing to fall back on
Right,
should something happen.
right, because it was Ray and I that were leaving, that was the end of our term on January 1, so,
Okay, well, you suggested putting it on the January.
Yes, on the agenda for the
December.
December meeting.
December
Yeah.
meeting.
And I can bring it up at council tomorrow night so that it's all handled properly.
right,
Oh, so it'll be a report.
I'll just
You'll report.
bring it up with council for a future agenda item.
Right.
And discussion.
right.
Right, but no appointments will be made. I mean, it's what the council wants to do with these vacancies coming up. Basically.
Council may choose to make some changes in who they want as council representatives.
Current members.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Right,
possible.
Yeah.
right.
I can't speak for everybody.
They control our fate.
I could try, but somebody would complain.
Well, you could actually give the report for Sharon, right? And bring it up.
I could, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah,
fill it out.
okay.
Okay. Okay, so we've got organizational changes, we've got the review of the new reports, our first set of
Yep.
reports.
And
Anything else?
I don't know, Milana, what do you think about putting on the agenda SCO, or do you want to wait till January for that?
I'd like to wait till January when we
Okay.
have that finance policy and procedure manual
Sure.
ready to go for council to review and accept.
Do you want to bring in the preliminary?
I'll do that in December.
Packet.
When I do the item to have on there is to have the next policy, written policy. And when I do that, I'll have the other ones, like as a draft
we'll do-
behind it.
Do that for January?
No, December.
December?
December.
Okay. Okay,
But we'll put it all together formally with the January meeting.
right. Okay. Review. Okay, anything else?
I'd like to get an update on Wilmington Trust and their reports at some point.
I have,
I'm not asking to do it now, I'm just saying, just to tell us where you are with it.
yes, can do
We'll
that.
have
You can
tax,
just mention it in December if you want.
Okay,
Okay?
I can do that.
first installment of property taxes is due November
December.
10th and delinquent
December the
December
10th.
10th, correct? So we won't have tax funds coming in
Usually it's in January.
January from the county.
Right.
The county transfers the funds to us in January.
Right.
Okay, so that'll be a January review on,
All the taxes that we
which would be
receive.
Melrose money coming in and property tax.
Right.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll just do just a little update.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell me how it's going.
Okay.
It was in the minutes from a prior meeting that we were going to talk about it. We didn't get it on the agenda for tonight. And just an update on how you're doing with the reporting.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
no,
we'll-
would be fine.
Okay, Wilmington Trust update. Okay, good. Okay. Anything else?
Make sure you get the right time, don't look at the clock.
We can actually end early. We usually don't.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so, let's see.
We might want to consider the possibility that we'll have a special meeting of this committee, maybe this month,
Okay.
if I can get the draft of the fiscal 16 audit. Because I don't have it yet. But when I have it, this committee does need to review it.
Well,
And when do you-
I'd be available, because that's caused all kinds of consternation. People out there.
I know. It's always like, I hate to say it because we have Thanksgiving this month and all that.
We'll
But,
just be glad to get a phone call.
okay, so as soon as I have it in hand, full draft, and it's been through legal, because legal needs to review it, when we have something that looks like a good final product, then we may have to call a special meeting so this committee can review it.
Okay,
Okay.
just let
So
me
that'll
know.
be, once it's received and the responses have been made and legal's reviewed, correct?
Right, right, so that you're not looking at it over and over and over.
Right.
Right.
Will we most likely receive something ahead of the meeting so we have time to review it?
Heavens, no, I wouldn't do that to you. No.
Okay,
As soon as we have something that we're comfortable with that looks good and we can all agree on, then we'll call for a special meeting. At that point, we should be able to send you an agenda with that document.
okay. Okay, great.
But sometimes, especially with the draft audit, we don't always get,
Yeah, I'm working to get it as,
so.
you know, as final as we possibly
That
can. But
particular
sure,
one,
this committee may come up and say, no, and we'll need to go back and fix it. So, but I definitely need this committee to get their opportunity to review it when I have it in my hands.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we can call adjournment at 7:30.